A heavy, suffocating smell of burning hung over the Daya River Valley, mixing with the metallic taste of blood that seemed to permeate the very air. It was the 261st year BC. The sun, crimson and dim through a shroud of smoke, illuminated a scene capable of stripping the sanity from anyone with a shred of compassion. The earth, scarred by the wheels of heavy war chariots and shaken by the tread of thousands of war elephants, no longer resembled a fertile plain. It was a graveyard of hopes. Emperor Ashoka, ruler of the Mauryan dynasty, stood on a rise, gazing at what remained of the Kalinga state. His victory was absolute. No one dared to defy his will anymore. The empire's borders had expanded to unimaginable limits, uniting almost the entire peninsula under one crown. But instead of the intoxicating triumph that usually fills the hearts of great conquerors, a cold, all-consuming emptiness grew in the emperor's chest. At that moment, he saw not a defeated enemy nor a strategic success. He saw the terrifying efficiency of human genius directed towards destruction. Hundreds of thousands of people ended their earthly journey overnight. Even more were those whose fates were broken forever, who lost home, family, and the meaning of existence. Ashoka, whom descendants would call the Great, realized in that instant a terrible truth that pierced him sharper than an enemy arrow. Human intellect outpaces its moral development. Give people fire to warm their dwelling, and they will burn down a neighboring village. Give them steel for a plow, and they will forge swords. This realization became a turning point not only in his personal destiny, but perhaps in the secret history of all human civilization. It was there, amidst the silence of the fallen warriors of Kalinga, that an idea was born that would survive millennia and become the invisible framework of history. The emperor understood that science, knowledge, and technology are a neutral force, like the wind. But in the hands of beings driven by greed, anger, and fear, this force becomes an instrument of self-destruction. If higher knowledge, the keys to controlling matter and consciousness, were left open, humanity would inevitably use them to wipe itself off the face of the earth. The lust for power would turn any discovery into a weapon. Then Ashoka made a decision unparalleled in the history of governance. He decided to remove all key knowledge capable of giving man divine power over nature and his fellow beings from the open world, and hide it behind 7 seals, leaving on the surface only what was safe for an immature mind. This was how the Society of 9 Unknown Men was founded. It was not a religious sect, a mystical cult, or a hobby club for bored aristocrats. It was an organization with the strictest discipline, absolute anonymity, and a single goal: to protect humanity from its own ignorance and aggression. 9 sages, whose true names had been erased from all chronicles, received a sacred task. Each of them became the guardian of one book, a unique compendium of knowledge in a specific field of science. These books contained information thousands of years ahead of their time, formulas and principles that official science would only discover after tens of centuries, and some of which have not been discovered to this day. From this moment began the great game of silence. The mysteries surrounding this brotherhood became its most reliable armor. Unlike many secret societies of later eras, which sought invisible influence or political power, the 9 unknown men craved complete oblivion. They understood that true power does not need recognition, and true guardians do not seek glory. Their task was not to rule the world by pulling the strings of puppet kings, but to prevent the world from falling into an abyss when another tyrant desired absolute power. But information, like water, has a way of seeping through any walls. Rumors of mysterious guardians of ancient wisdom began to circulate throughout Asia, passed in whispers from teacher to student, and then, with the era of great geographical discoveries, penetrated into Europe, stirring the minds of alchemists, explorers, and adventurers. However, the true scale of the Society of Nine's mission only becomes clear upon detailed examination of what exactly they were guarding. These were not collections of spells or prayers. These were dry, precise scientific treatises describing the fundamental laws of the universe. Legend has it that each of the 9 directions was overseen by a separate guardian, and this knowledge was updated and supplemented over the centuries, as the sages did not just guard old scrolls, but also conducted their own research, delving deeper and deeper into the understanding of the universe. The structure of this knowledge itself is a map of the threats that Ashoka prophetically foresaw for humanity. The first book, perhaps the most dangerous of all in the hands of a politician, was dedicated to techniques of propaganda and psychological warfare. Ashoka, being an experienced ruler, understood that the most terrible battle does not take place on a field strewn with bodies, but in the minds of men. He who possesses the art of shaping public opinion, who can change the beliefs of the masses and direct the anger of the crowd, possesses greater power than any general with a 1,000,000-strong army. This book described methods of mind manipulation, ways of creating and destroying ideologies, mechanisms that make people go to their doom for the sake of others' ideas. The second book concerned human physiology. It described methods of influencing the body, capable of both healing the most complex ailments and instantly stopping vital processes with a simple touch. An art known in Eastern legends as the touch of delayed death is considered merely a pale shadow, a random leak of information from this volume. Knowledge of how to turn a person's nervous system against themselves made the owner of this information a shaper of destinies, capable of eliminating opponents without a single trace of violence, mimicking a natural demise. The third book was dedicated to microbiology. Long before the invention of the microscope and the discovery of bacteria by Europeans, Indian sages knew about the existence of organisms invisible to the naked eye. But more importantly, they knew about their potential. They understood how to create healing serums, but also knew how to turn disease into a weapon of mass destruction. In an era when Western medicine still relied on primitive methods, the custodians of the third book probably already understood the principles of immunization and the structure of epidemics. The fear that some mad ruler might poison the water in wells with an invisible poison forced them to keep this knowledge in the strictest secrecy. The fourth book dealt with the transmutation of metals. Alchemy, which European scientists struggled with for centuries in search of the philosopher's stone, was, for the 9, apparently a solved problem. But the reason for secrecy here was purely economic. If the secret of turning lead into gold became public knowledge, the global economy would collapse in an instant. Gold would lose its value, trade ties would break down, and chaos would ensue, leading to hunger and wars. The custodians understood that financial stability was the key to relative peace. The fifth book explored all forms of communication, terrestrial and extraterrestrial. Legends say it contained knowledge of methods for communicating over vast distances without wires, thousands of years before the invention of radio and the Internet. Moreover, some interpreters believe it contained methods for contacting other forms of intelligence. This knowledge provided the advantage of complete awareness, knowing the enemy's plans before they gave the order. The sixth book, one of the most mysterious and coveted by military personnel, was dedicated to gravity. Indian texts often mention vimanas, flying machines capable of traversing vast distances and hovering in the air. The secret of anti-gravity, of controlling the weight of objects, opened the way to creating an air fleet that no fortress could withstand. Ashoka understood that control of the sky meant control of the earth, and he did not want the heavens to become a new battlefield. The seventh book described cosmogony, the origin and structure of the universe. The eighth book was dedicated to the nature of light, the use of light as a weapon, the creation of concentrated beams capable of incinerating matter, a prototype of modern lasers. All of this was described and hidden. And finally, the ninth book dealt with sociology, the laws of societal development, predicting the decline and flourishing of civilizations through the analysis of big data, which allowed for mathematically precise predictions of the future. Throughout the centuries, there were those who tried to access this knowledge. In the 10th century, Pope Sylvester II, known for his incredible erudition, legendary possessed a speaking head, a copper mechanism that answered complex questions. Was this a primitive computing machine, created based on fragmented knowledge from the fifth book, which he received from Arab scholars? But the most persistent and dangerous attempts to break into the repository of ancient wisdom occurred in the 20th century, when technology and ambition reached their peak. It was here that one of the darkest organizations in history entered the historical stage: the Nazi Society Ahnenerbe, or ancestral heritage. The leadership of the Third Reich was obsessed with the idea of occult superiority and the search for ancient technologies that could provide Germany with world domination. They believed that ancient Aryans possessed superhuman knowledge, lost or hidden in the East. SS expeditions were sent to Tibet and India with a specific goal: to find the entrance to Shambhala or Agartha, mythical underground countries that many researchers associated with the refuge of the Nine Unknown. The Nazis were not just looking for spiritual enlightenment, they were looking for weapons. In the Ahnenerbe documents, there was a search for vril energy, a mysterious force capable of controlling matter, which directly refers to the content of the sixth book on gravity and the eighth book on light. German scientists feverishly worked on creating saucer-shaped flying machines, strangely reminiscent of descriptions of vimanas. There is a hypothesis that their engineers had some fragments of ancient blueprints, but they lacked key elements of understanding the physics of the process. However, the keepers, it seems, foresaw such a turn of events. The Nazis' attempts to establish direct contact with the Brotherhood ended in failure. Expeditions returned either with nothing or with a set of mystical rituals that had no practical military value. It can be assumed that the Society of Nine deliberately created false leads, informational noise, to lead seekers of absolute weapons into a dead end. The outcome of World War II could have been completely different if the Book of Microbiology or the Book of Gravity had fallen into the hands of people who built death camps. This was a moment when history balanced on a razor's edge, and the silence of the wise became salvation for millions. Nevertheless, it became increasingly difficult to keep knowledge completely locked away in an age of scientific and technological progress. Parallel to the mystical quests of the Nazis, a different drama, related to scientific breakthrough, unfolded on the other side of the ocean. Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, was a man of deep culture and knew Sanskrit. his famous phrase after the first nuclear device test in the Alamogordo Desert. "I am become death, the destroyer of worlds," is a direct quote from the Bhagavad Gita. But the connection may be deeper than mere quoting. The descriptions of a weapon in the ancient Indian epic Mahabharata, which is equal in power to 1,000 suns, and from which hair and nails fall out, frighteningly accurately coincide with the effect of a nuclear explosion and radiation sickness. The question arises, did 20th century physicists truly discover everything from scratch? Or was there a controlled leak at some point? Perhaps the keepers, seeing the inevitability of war, allowed some knowledge to seep out to balance forces. Or perhaps humanity independently approached the threshold beyond which the secrets of the 8th book were hidden. But unlike the sages, modern scientists had no moral prohibition against using these forces. Today we live in a reality where, it seems, the seals from many books have been torn off, but this was done in a barbaric way. We broke down the library doors without learning to read the safety rules. Let's consider the book of sociology. Seemingly the most harmless of the 9, yet it described the prediction of the future through big data analysis. In the modern world, where social network algorithms and search engines know more about our desires than we do ourselves, where the behavior of entire nations is calculated by supercomputers, we see the implementation of the principles of the 9th book. We have become transparent, and this knowledge is used by corporations and governments for control, from which Ashoka tried to protect the world. The Book of Light found its reflection in laser technologies, which are used everywhere today, from surgery to missile guidance. The Book of Communication materialized in the Internet, instantly connecting billions of people. But each of these gifts brought with it a shadow. The global network became a hotbed of disinformation, lasers become weapons, and biotechnologies have come close to the possibility of editing the human genome, which echoes the dangers described in the 3rd book. We received the technologies of the gods, while remaining with instincts that have changed little since the Battle of Kalinga. The paradox of modernity lies in the fact that the secrecy maintained by the society was perhaps the only deterrent. When knowledge of propaganda methods and psychological warfare, Book 1, became publicly available and was amplified by digital technologies, the world plunged into the chaos of post-truth. The information space became a battlefield where truth and lies are indistinguishable, and human consciousness is attacked every second. We see how the worst fears of the ancient emperor are coming true. Knowledge is used to divide people, to incite hatred and fear, not to unite. This historical path leads us to understand that technological progress is not synonymous with human progress. Having a smartphone with access to all the world's knowledge does not make us wiser or kinder. On the contrary, the power of the tools we hold in our hands demands from us a discipline of spirit that we often lack. The history of the Society of 9 is a mirror in which we see our vulnerabilities. It reminds us that the most destructive war is the war for meanings, the war for control over reality. And in this war, humanity often loses because it has forgotten the main warning. Manipulation of consciousness is more terrifying than physical elimination. If one looks closely at how science developed over the last 100 years, one can notice astonishing coincidences. Many discoveries were made simultaneously by different people in different parts of the world, as if some invisible hand opened a sluice gate. Or, conversely, promising developments that promised cheap energy or a breakthrough in medicine were suddenly curtailed, and their authors disappeared from the public sphere or were ridiculed. Conspiracy theorists see in this the evil intent of corporations. But if one applies the template of the Society of Nine to this, the picture becomes different. This could be the work of forest wardens, removing dangerous branches from the tree of knowledge before the trunk is strong enough to bear their weight. Reflecting on the ending of this endless story, we come to understand that the legend of the Brotherhood is not just a historical anecdote or a plot for an adventure novel. It is a warning encoded in the ages. It is a message that the greatest secret is not how to build an anti-gravity engine or how to transmute metals. The greatest secret and the greatest problem is man himself, his ability to love and hate, to create and destroy. And until we unravel this mystery, until we learn to control our own inner beasts, we cannot be trusted with the keys to the universal library. The circle closes, bringing us back to the image of the solitary emperor on a smoking battlefield. Ashoka made his choice, a choice for restraint, a choice for silence for the sake of preserving life. He understood that humanity is a child playing with a loaded weapon, and he acted like a strict parent, hiding the dangerous toy on the top shelf. But the children grew up. We built a ladder and reached that shelf ourselves. We broke the seals, picked the locks, and now stand with open books in our hands, blinded by the radiance of knowledge for which, perhaps, we are not yet ready. The Society of the Nine Unknowns may still exist. Perhaps they are watching us from the shadows, sadly observing us carelessly playing with fire they tried to hide. Or perhaps they are already among us, subtly trying to guide our chaotic discoveries into a safe channel, holding back the finger poised over the red button. But to rely solely on secret guardians means to shirk responsibility, to remain infantile children awaiting salvation from adults. Today, each of us possesses a fraction of knowledge and power that the ancients could only dream of. Each of us makes choices every day, how to use our words, our skills, our resources. Ultimately, Ashoka's 9 books are a metaphor for our own potential. The potential to become creators or to destroy ourselves. And what page we turn to next, whether it will be a chapter of prosperity or an epilogue of the end of civilization, no longer depends on 9 nameless wise men, but on billions of people inhabiting this fragile planet. The story continues. The pen is now in our hands, and the ink has not yet dried.